Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel guys. This is going to be another swipe, but this time it's about a phone that I've covered extensively on this channel, and believe it or not, it was actually one of the first Android phones I ever covered on this channel besides like my LG G2 I was using at the time, and that phone is the Samsung Galaxy S7, and we're going to take a look at it, how it holds up in the later part of 2019. Now a lot of things have not changed for this phone at all, besides this phone getting some security updates, which is pretty cool, but overall it's still in the same OS, it's still in the same pretty much everything. But we have seen the successors of this phone, the Samsung Galaxy S10, the Samsung Galaxy Note 10's kind of a successor, not really, but let's just go ahead and see how this phone holds up in the later part of 2019. Now, looking on the front, we have a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. That one's 1440p, and I can tell you right now, this panel is still so good in my opinion. The panel itself is very good. However, just like many, probably like 3 out of every 4 Samsung Galaxy S7s you're going to see, or even any older OLED device, you're going to see a lot of burn-in on that display, and this one is no exception to it. This one does have quite a bit of burn-in on it. You can't really tell when it's like on a darker kind of, wallpaper, but when you're going through apps, when you have the Play Store open or something, you can see all those images burnt in, and that doesn't really, that might not affect everybody. A lot of people probably won't care, but it does kind of affect, the resale value of it, and just kind of overall using the phone. Like, I've used so many phones and I still notice the burn-in, and it's still one of the most irritating things ever. I personally could not use a phone with this much burn-in on it, but you might be different, and to each their own. But for this specific device especially, and it's not just this one, it's for many phones, any older OLED display, just really, that's one of the worst things about it. So hopefully these newer OLED panels that are coming out, hopefully those get better with the burn-in thing. But this one came out in 2016 in February. I should have probably started there. So it's over 3 years old at this point. It's going to be 4 years here in a couple months. And the front already hit on, it does have a little bit of bezel on it. We have that home button, which doubles as a fingerprint sensor with the capacitive keys right next to it. The bezels are kind of thinner on the sides, not really. This thing has a huge bezel on it. 72.1% screen to body ratio. That is pretty high. So it definitely still has a lot of bezel on it. Looking on the bottom though, we do have a micro USB port with the headphone jack, no USB Type-C, which is kind of another knock to this phone. The Galaxy S8 eventually brought the USB Type-C, but this phone does not have it. Also looking on the back, a single camera, which I'll get into in a second, but I have nothing but good things to say about it for the most part. And the rest of the phone is pretty, minimal, I guess. Micro SD card slot built into this phone as well, which is super nice because the top tier storage of this model is 64 gigabytes, which is pretty small, but you have to remember this thing came out in 2016 and it has a micro SD card slot, so it's all good. And for the most part, that pretty much covers up everything on the outside. Really, it's still, in my opinion, a pretty premium feeling phone. You have that glass on the back, which is very nice. You have that very premium feeling OLED display on the front. The chassis of the phone, it feels very, very premium as well. And there's really nothing to hate on it too much. Besides the OLED panel, this phone still feels like a very premium phone. This phone also has IP68 dust or water resistance, which is super nice to see on an older phone like this. That's super awesome. Now, moving on to the software side of things. So this thing was released with the Android Marshmallow. You are able to upgrade it to Android Oreo, but it is not going any further than Android Oreo. How do I know this? Because everyone knows this, that they didn't get One UI. At least officially, of course. There's still custom ROMs being developed for this thing though, which is super cool. This phone isn't a brand new phone anymore, but people still show so much love for this phone, and there's a subreddit dedicated for this phone that a lot of people still go to sometimes. So overall, even if this phone isn't like the most practical phone right now, a lot of people are still interested in it, which is really awesome. And overall, the software wise, yes, it's tapped to Android Oreo. Do I notice it being super horrible in terms of the software? You know what, kind of, because this thing was the last phone to get supported on TouchWiz, and that's kind of, One UI to TouchWiz is kind of a bigger software update in my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and say it's like the worst thing ever, but definitely when you're looking at something like One UI, especially One UI 2, with all those new gestures and everything, and that is really, really cool in my opinion. And it's kind of a shame this phone won't really necessarily experience that, but it's not that big of a deal. I guess it's whatever at the end of the day. But like I said, custom ROMs, third-party support is still there for this phone, which is awesome. So if you're into it, that's cool. If you're not, you can always keep it on stock if you want to. This thing's still getting security updates for the most part too, which is really nice. So that kind of covers it up in terms of the software side of things. Let's go ahead and talk about the performance side of things. Now, there's a couple different models of this. This one has the Exynos 8890 octa chipset, an octa-core CPU, and 4 gigabytes of RAM on both models. There was a 32 gigabyte model and a 64 gigabyte model, but like I said, you can put a micro SD card slot if you want to in here. And what I can tell you in terms of the performance is that there's two ways to look at it, okay? In the like lower kind of end of the performance side of things, such as like opening apps, going through, one Snapchat to the other Instagram and going through things, you're not going to be that bad. I mean, it's not going to be a bad experience at all. Really, any phone can do that for the most part. The good thing about the Samsung Galaxy S7 is that it's still getting updates through the App Store in terms of the apps themselves. So if Snapchat pushes out a new update or if Instagram pushes an update, you're still going to get that in this phone. So that's really cool. So all those new features and everything are going to be ported over to the Samsung Galaxy S7. But that's also a bad thing too, because a lot of those updates are being supported for the newer phones as well. And they're pretty much being optimized for those newer phones. So for an older phone like this, it's kind of a, not the best performing device right now. So you kind of have to remember that when you're messing with it. But I mean, what I can tell you is this phone, without a doubt, in terms of performance, it'll definitely get you from point A to point B, but it's going to take you a minute to get there, in my opinion. It's not going to be like completely fast. It's not going to be completely slow either in terms of the lower end performance side of things. But once you do kind of get to that, upper end, like the Real Racing 3 and the high intensive gaming, that's when things start turning super weird. So the performance itself is really not even that good for me. Compared to what we have now, it's not that good. I'll be completely honest. But the worst thing about this phone is that it heats up so crazy. And I thought it might just be my specific S7. I've had Galaxy S7s before that didn't heat up that much, but my Galaxy S4 heat up like crazy, my Galaxy S6 heat up like crazy, and now my Galaxy S7, this one, is heating up like crazy again. And maybe it is just this specific S7, but if you've owned S7s before, let me know in the comment section below what your experience was with it. But right now, it's not that good in my opinion. The performance might be even okay, but if the phone heats up a lot, that kind of rubs me the wrong way as well. So what I can tell you is in terms of performance, the phone itself isn't that bad. Lower end performing things isn't that bad. But once you do kind of start getting into the higher end tier gaming or higher end tier performance type of things, that's when things kind of turn out a little bit worse in my opinion. So take it how you will. I'm sure a lot of you guys have a lot of strong opinions on the S7, but that's kind of my take on this thing. So let's go ahead and move on to the camera side of things. This thing has a single 12 megapixel camera on the back. It does have optical image stabilization, which is really nice. And the overall camera isn't that bad, The really cool thing about this camera that I've said before is that there are so many features built into this camera app, which, a lot of people might hate on it. They say it's too bloated, this or that. I personally think that's one of the strongest assets for a Samsung Galaxy phone ever since like the Galaxy S3 all the way up until like the Galaxy S10 even. That's seriously one of the greatest things about these type of phones. With something like an iPhone, we don't really have that many features built in, but with the Galaxy S7, we do have a lot of features, which is so awesome. And even if the quality isn't that great, like I said, you still have a lot of features you can depend on in the stock camera app. Now, looking at the craziest thing ever, this thing can do 4K at 30 frames per second, which a lot of people might be like, oh my god, that's so bad, this or that. Me personally, this phone came out in 2016. It's not a brand new phone anymore. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll give it the pass because, in 2016, people weren't really shooting 4K at 60 frames on their phones just yet. I'm sure there were phones out there that were doing that, but this phone just didn't have that capability. But the one thing you have to keep in mind is that the Google Pixel 4 XL that just came out still cannot do 4K at 60 frames, and that came out in 2019. That one, it's just crazy in my opinion what Google was thinking. But this phone kind of in a way has the same amount of video resolutions as the Google Pixel 4 XL. So I guess that's kind of a jab at the Pixel 4 XL, but also kind of an update and a cool bragging right for the Samsung Galaxy S7. So in terms of the camera resolutions and camera quality, I like it. I don't think it's bad. It definitely can be better, and it has gotten better since then with like the Galaxy S8, 9, and even 10. But this one, wasn't too bad in my opinion. So overall, that kind of covers that aspect, the whole camera aspect side of things. Let's go ahead and talk about the battery life real quick. This thing has a 3000 mAh battery, and it has wireless charging, which is nice. But when it came out, and I remember when I bought it, the battery life was pretty good at the time. I had really no complaints. I mean, obviously I didn't have too many things to compare to at that point, but now looking back at that phone, it really wasn't bad. Of course, with the S8, S9, S10, battery life has gotten better over time in my opinion, but it is what it is. But with this phone now, the battery life just isn't that good, and I attribute that to two things, or three things more so. The software updates themselves, I don't think Oreo was that great in terms of battery life. The app updates themselves, these apps are using more and more power for their specific whatever, and that might have something to do with it. But the third thing, these batteries on these phones have degraded so much, especially with this phone heating up as much as it does. That's not great for the battery life and the battery health overall, so it's definitely going to degrade even faster. So this phone, without a doubt, the degradation of the battery, but also the software that it's on just really isn't that great. And it's kind of like a double whammy for this phone. It's like either or, have great software or low, like bad battery, or have good battery but bad software. This one is like both, worst of both worlds in my opinion. So to kind of sum up this whole entire thing, man, like to be completely honest, I think the Samsung Galaxy S7, if you're going to spend like $50 to pick it up, I don't think it's going to be that bad of a deal. I think it still has some power in it. I just don't think like it's worth getting for the most part. Like you can get a Galaxy S8 for like $100 something, and I would way rather recommend something like that over this phone. Like this phone isn't bad, but it's like it's already outdone with software. It's not getting software support for the most part. The battery just really isn't that great. It doesn't look the best. It has a lot of bezel on it, but if you can get over those things, I mean, this thing, you can get custom ROM this thing. You have a kind of a great screen on it depending on the burn-in. You have a fingerprint sensor up front, great build quality, the headphone jack, which is awesome, a micro SD card slot, which I think I already said, and really that's probably the main things, but it's not a bad phone in my opinion, So depending on the price you get it, I would recommend it, but for the most part, I would say, at least go up to a Galaxy S8. That's probably the point where I would start telling people to start at, because that phone does kind of future-proof you a little bit. Even though it's not getting Android 10 most likely, there's still a huge development community behind it, and you can go and do whatever you want with it and still be perfectly fine. So to each their own, but that's kind of what I would recommend in my opinion. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it would mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel. All those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate it if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out with it.